On this season of Destination Earth, Akane and I head back to our home country of Japan to explore the southern reaches of the island. Join us as we make our way across Nagasaki Prefecture, as we learn about its atomic past, discover its incredible countryside, and hike some of Japan's most scenic trails. Where are we off to today? Let's find out. There is no shortage of history in Japan. As one of the most powerful and long-lived nations in Asia, Japan has seen a lot of change over the course of its history. Hundreds of years ago, people realized that one way to increase wealth and broaden their local offerings was to trade with surrounding nations. Japan was no different. Earlier today, we had the opportunity to go to the Nagasaki Museum of History and Culture. So this is a museum that is dedicated to exploring the history of this area of Japan. And there's so much going on, including trading, which is kind of what we're going to be talking about today when we visit the site of Dejima. So this area was a small island just off of the main part of Nagasaki City that was used specifically for trade with Europe. One of the first things you notice when coming to Dejima is that you have to cross a bridge, no matter where you try and enter from. Why is that? Well, as it may suggest, Dejima is on an island. Dejima is a small, man-made island that occupies about 2.2 acres of the former harbor. It was built in 1634 to separate those coming to trade from afar with the rest of the Japanese population. It was in this small, specialized community that all trade was conducted. Now, before Dejima, trade occurred in a town called Hilado, a location west of Nagasaki, and a location we'll be visiting in a future video. In 1570, Nagasaki was designated as the port of call for all Portuguese ships. The rapidly growing town came to include many churches, becoming known as the Little Rome of Japan. During this time, they implemented a red seal system that marked ships approved for trade by designated governments. Nagasaki was quickly becoming the key base for all trade activities, which saw these so-called Japan towns popping up all across Southeast Asia. Eventually, all trade was narrowed down to Nagasaki from the outside world. Items like sugar and medicine were coming into the country, while items like gold, silver, copper, marine products, and pottery were all heading out. So walking through, you're going to have a mix of things to see and do. Some of it's going to be museum style, where they have exhibitions within cases that show you things like pottery. And then there's going to be definitely some buildings to go through. Now you're going to notice that a lot of the buildings are empty, and so this may or may not cater to your interest. It's more so of getting that background, realizing what this area was and why it's so special, as opposed to actually going and seeing the artifacts that are associated with it. Nagasaki prospered thanks to the East Asia trade. The Chinese living in Nagasaki at the time founded Chinese temples. But when the government strengthened management controls over trade in Nagasaki, the Chinese residents were forced to live in special areas called the Chinese Quarter. From this area, people from Nagasaki could come into contact with the Chinese culture. During our time in Nagasaki, we also took the time to explore this area, visiting a few temples and connecting with this part of the history. Be sure to join us in a future video as we explore places like the famous Confucius Shrine. With trade limited to the Nagasaki area, the fact that it was the only place in Japan where up-to-date information about China and Europe could be obtained, many Japanese people were attracted to Nagasaki to study a wide range of technologies and knowledge, especially medicine, literature, art and foreign languages. By 1859, accelerated learning in various fields like mining, medicine, printing, and logistics were being held at the Nagasaki Naval Training Institute. This was a major development into the modernization of Japan, as most of the country held tight through their traditional way of life. During this time, a foreign settlement in Nagasaki was developed, including the building of Western-style offices, banks, and hotels. Japan's first English-language newspaper was also produced. This Dejima Methodist Church was founded in 1875 to be used as a school and a place of worship for those practicing Christianity. In 1883, it became the Dejima Anglican Seminary and was the first Protestant seminary in all of Japan. So we finished our day here in Dejima, and it was really quite nice to be able to take what we learned in the museum and then pair it with something that is actually there in person. Now, of course, it's completely different. At one point, this was a hustling and bustling place that was just full of people, full of trade, full of goods. Now it's mostly just empty buildings. But I think if you were just to go to Dejima on your own, you would have a basic understanding. There is some literature in order to be able to help guide you through and get you to understand. But one of our things is to really recommend pairing this with the museum, because I think once you have both of those together, you're really going to be able to absorb what happened here. And as you're walking through the streets, you're going to be able to keep that in mind, and it's going to kind of round out that experience. Where we're going to next, that's a surprise. You're going to have to stay tuned for the next video to find out.